right, sounds good. All right, sounds good. White Sox, go, go, White Sox. Let's go, 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 White. Welcome, friends. You are tuned in to Chicago's fastest growing and most fun podcast, Chicago Sports Podcast, Monsters of the Madhouse. Folks, welcome to the Madhouse. We are so great to have you with us on this special Chicago Bears edition of Chicago's fastest growing podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Clee Campbell, joined by our executive producer and creator, Brandon Trax Hyatt, back in the house, along with Matt the Coop Man Cooper from Q103.1 in Louisville, the voice of the NFL football fan, and ladies and gentlemen, host of the upcoming Bears podcast, First and 10 with Foz, Mike the Foz now. Gentlemen, how we doing tonight, boys?
Awesome.
What's up, man?
Terrific. Great to see y'all, guys. Guys, we are joined tonight by a very special guest. He is Chicago sports fans' eyes, ears, and information pipeline to all things Chicago Bears. He's a Columbia College graduate and one of the NFL's best beat writers. Please welcome to the podcast, to the Monsters Madhouse tonight, folks, the award-winning Erik Lambert of Sports Mockery. Erik, my friend, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, our pleasure. We appreciate you taking time out of a very busy day of breaking news for you to spend some time with us and our great listeners and viewers. And folks, please, if you have any questions for Erik, please chime in. Put a question in. We'll try to get that question posed to Erik. Whatever you're thinking, Chicago Bears, Erik Lambert is your man tonight. But Erik, before we kind of dive into to where the Bears are, here he's sitting with the number one pick in April's NFL draft and getting ready for the NFL free agency season. Let's talk about the Erik Lambert story. If you could give our readers, our viewers, a little bit of a background, where you're from, where does your story begin, and how did you fall in love with sports writing?
It's the funny thing. You mentioned Columbia. I went there for originally fiction writing because I always felt that I wanted to write books when I got older, coming out of high school. And, I got my degree there, a bachelor's, and then I went back for a degree in teaching of writing. And over the course, I started, my fandom for the Bears really started to grow around that time. And then, I started seeing online that they, you could apply for jobs in sports writing. I'm like, man, it'd be really cool if I could just sort of part-time write about the Bears. I did it for a while, made a little bit of money, and I'm like, man, I wonder if I can actually make a go of this. And, it expanded from there. I worked for Fansided for a long time, and that's where I fell in love with the NFL draft because I worked for their NFL Mocks website. And then by happenstance, I was on Twitter one day, and Sports Mockery put out, a recruiting pitch for writers to write about the Bears. And I'm like, oh, I got to apply for this because, that was my dream, to write about the Bears. And that was in 2013. So it's been 10 years and this is where I am.
Wow. Yeah. 10 years. And here you are, one of the leading voices, Chicago media sports voices on the Bears. The thing about it is, I was a beat writer for the University of Wisconsin Iowa football teams for 15 years. I know how tough that is coming up with content. You and your team are producing some days 6 to 8 stories a day. Can you talk about your motor, your journalism motor? I mean, you are putting out as much a copy as as anybody on the beat these days?
It's sort of something I inherited from my parents, sort of a grinding mentality, keep your nose to the grindstone, all that sort of thing. If you work hard enough and you maintain a certain level of quality in your content, the readers will eventually come. The people will, notice your work. And that's sort of how I've approached it. I always set myself a certain goal. I want to get out 5 or 6 articles every day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 at night. That way I can spread myself out. I don't overwork myself too much. I can take frequent breaks, have my meals, all that sort of stuff. And my schedule is, pretty flexible in that regard. And it's worked out pretty well for me over the years. It took some tweaking because I, felt I was going to kill myself at one point or another with, a grind like that from time to time, but it's worked out for me. And, because the NFL is a 24/7, 365 kind of league, it makes it easy to do something like this year round. So, you really need to have a certain level of passion for what you're doing in order to do something like this. And because I'm such a diehard Bears fan, that made it kind of easy for me because I don't really see this as just a job because it's also my passion. And I sort of think that feeds into it as well.
Yeah. Can you talk about, you've got your own voice, you've got your own style. Who are some of the writers that inspired you along the way?
There's quite a few. I always love Adam Johns of The Athletic. I really think he puts out quality work. Adam Hoge, his podcast partner is another guy I really, really respect. I know Brad Biggs isn't popular with a lot of people, for one reason or another, but I also highly respect him as a beat writer and an insider. And so those guys, there was a bunch of guys for ESPN who did some high quality work over the years. And there are other names out there, but I sort of, tried to take certain aspects from each one and apply it to my own craft without losing my own voice in terms of what I'm trying to put out there. I don't want to be somebody else. I have to remember to be myself while still trying to be as professional as possible. That's always sort of the tightrope you need to walk in this kind of business.
Erik, I have a question for you because my girlfriend's also a writer. She does news down here as a writer, and something that I didn't realize is the phone calls that she'll get phone calls at 4 or 5 in the morning from sheriff's departments, from police officers, from these politicians and stuff like that. Did you expect that going into being a writer? Like once you started getting your foot, as soon as you got started into your career, did you start getting is everything on 24/7 kind of like what she deals with in another area, and same thing with you?
Not quite, I'm not getting calls like that from politicians and whatnot, but, I do get contacted a lot more often from fans, from, other writers, people who either want to seek my opinions, like you guys calling me on this podcast. I was not expecting that, but at the same time, I always try to be open with the people who do contact me whenever possible. Be accommodating. That's sort of something I tried to learn doing something like this, and have an open mind when they're asking you questions and that sort of thing. And I think your lovely lady is learning the same thing. Always try to be malleable, always try to be accommodating, but also don't let them influence what you're trying to do in terms of your job. And I think that's something that I had to learn early on because I had a really big problem with that. I'd let other people's opinions influence me a little too much. And that's something I needed to learn to sort of suppress in order to try and remain, a pro at what I'm doing in this job. And it's just something you learn with experience more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you are checking into Monsters of the Madhouse, brought to you by TC's World of Wonders, Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor, and Budget Cars. We are talking to Bears beat writer Erik Lambert of Sports Mockery. Also, we are joined by our good friend, former Bears star Kellen Davis is checking in, along with our great insider here on the Monsters panel, Caleb James. Caleb and Kellen, fellas, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you tonight, guys. And I guess, fellas, guys, feel free if anyone has a question for Erik to dive in at any time. But Erik, if we could head on into to the NFL, which is I can only imagine how busy it is for you right now, trying to keep track of these 100,000 puzzle pieces going on. Let's start off, if I could, with you for an old Bears friend of ours from the Bears, Matt Nagy, our former coach, who will be coaching in the Super Bowl. For skeptical Bears fans who are looking at Matt Nagy and seeing Coach Nagy in the Super Bowl, from what you've seen, how much of an impact would you say has he played this year in Patrick Mahomes' return to his former MVP form and also his Super Bowl form?
I mean, Patrick Mahomes was the best quarterback in the NFL before Nagy got there, and he's still the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't think his influence really changed him all that much. He was great before. He's still great. He's going to be great years from now. I feel happy for Nagy because he's in a winning situation. He has a chance to chase a ring, and I'm never going to begrudge a guy who has an opportunity like that. But in terms of whether or not he made the key difference in the Chiefs getting to the Super Bowl this year, I don't see much of his influence in that regard. I see their draft class this year, which looks to be outstanding. Karlaftis, McDuffie, a lot of really good players they drafted, some other key pieces. You know, they're just such a well-run team with Andy Reid and company over there, and I respect them a lot for that. It makes me excited having Ryan Poles in the mix because he's seen that blueprint. He sees how to do it. Same with Ian Cunningham and the Eagles. So, you know, I'm happy for Nagy, but, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't think his influence had much of an impact on Mahomes in terms of this year. He's been superb for years, even before he got there.
Erik, do you think this is the year that they lose their offensive coordinator and Erik Bieniemy?
No, honestly, I don't, because
really,
what you know, everybody knows that's Andy Reid's show. It's his offense. He's the one really calling the shots. And from everything I've heard about Bieniemy, he's a good guy, but he has some, you know, past demons in his closet that a lot of teams are, you know, very wary of. And he also hasn't been interviewing all that well from the rumors I've heard. You know, I really don't want to get too much into that because I don't know the full details, but at the same time, from what I've heard, I'm not surprised he hasn't gotten a job at this point. And if he hasn't gotten a job at this point, after all the success that Mahomes has had, he's probably not going to get one.
Wow. Huh. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I tell you what, let's bring the conversation back home here, if we could, Erik. You know, based on the conversations you're having with your sources, with peoples in the Bears organization, right now, as we sit here on January 31st, is GM Ryan Poles keeping all of his options open right now in regard to the number one pick?
Yes. You know, I think he's open to staying put and taking the best player available. Obviously, you always have to keep that in the back of your mind. I do believe he would prefer to trade it because he needs a lot more players than he can get with just 8 picks right now. And if you can get more inventory, high second round picks, high third round picks, maybe a future first if possible, that is highly appealing to him. And, you know, this is the sort of draft that sort of leans into what the Bears need. There's a lot of good edge rushers in this draft. There's some good defensive tackles, some good offensive linemen. There's some wide receiver depth, even though it's not a star-studded class compared to others. So if he can add, you know, some quality draft picks on top of that and really sort of do what he wants to do, he wants to build through the draft. So I think that would be something he's really interested in if he can get the right kind of offer. He's not just going to sell the pick for just a pittance. But, you know, it all comes down to how he views the quarterbacks. I don't think he's going to move on from Justin Fields personally, but I do think he's at least keeping an open mind because maybe Bryce Young makes this crazy impression, or Stroud, or even Levis. You always have to keep an open mind in these situations because as good as Justin did play, he was outstanding as a runner, but he still showed some concerns in the passing game that he has to clear up before you can consider him a true franchise quarterback. But he did show enough to earn another year unless, as Poles said, he's blown away by somebody in this draft class.
You know, Erik, I was thinking about this. You were just talking about all the holes that the Bears have, and I'm thinking about the games I was watching the games on Sunday, and you have the star power of Burrow and Mahomes, and that's what you're thinking about when you see those two teams play. But for me, I thought the stars of the game was Hassan Reddick and Chris Jones of Kansas City. I think those are the players that really wreaked havoc, and I think those are the MVPs of both games. And so for the longest time, I'm thinking like, well, maybe the Bears need to really start with the offensive line and start looking to build there. But then I'm like, man, with game-changing players like those guys, look what they did in the playoffs. Maybe that's what the Bears go in that direction. I guess there's just so many holes you don't know where to go. But where would you like to start, or where do you think they should start, or do you kind of look at the free agent class first and then you go to the draft?
The trenches. Just get help in the trenches. They need it on the offensive side. They need it on the defensive side. They need pass rush in the worst way possible. I don't care if it's interior or on the edges. Get somebody who can help because they were awful. 20 sacks total. 4 of them came from your rookie safety. I mean, that can't happen if you want to win in the playoffs. I think the Eagles proved it, and the Chiefs proved that they dominated at the line of scrimmage when they had to. And that's the good thing about having Ryan Poles in charge, is because he understands that. He's an offensive line guy. He understands that if you control the trenches, you control the game. And I think that's where they want to get. Offensive line isn't really, stacked at the top of the draft. I think the defensive line is. You got Will Anderson, you got Jalen Carter, you've got Tyree Wilson, who I'm a big personal fan of from Texas Tech. He's really long, 36-inch arms, athletic as hell. He reminds me a lot of Carlos Dunlap, who was dominant with the Bengals for a long period of time. So they have options, whether they stay at number one or move down. So I would attack the trenches one way or another, both in free agency and in the draft.
If we could bring in Kellen Davis, former Bears star. Kellen, Eric's talking about the importance of, taking care of the trenches, and how important block to success for an NFL offense. If you're Ryan Poles right now, Kellen, is that your priority when heading into free agency, taking care of those trench spots on both sides of the line?
Absolutely. At the base of the game is controlling the line of scrimmage, either on offense or defense. And like you were talking about before, is, if you're not getting any pressure, nobody can cover forever. That makes it very hard to have a good defense. I think, like, you look at the Eagles, I think they have 70-some sacks this year, and multiple guys in the top in double-digit sacks. That's what you want. It's kind of like reminds me of when we were playing. Our offense was pretty good, but our defense was really good. And defense wins championships. If you can stop the other team from scoring, you can win it with a field goal.
Eagles defense without Robert Quinn playing either, and him being on the DL the entire year. So who knows what kind of impact he would have had if he was healthy all season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's very simple to me as far as, if you can, I guess the thing about the Bears offensive line that's kind of confusing me is how well we were able to run the ball. Yet in pass protection, we were, kind of weak in pass protection. And then, on the other side, it's kind of like you got to start, in my mind, you got to start on the edges on defense and then work your way in. Because if you can get somebody inside, they can at least hold, control a couple of gaps at one time. Then you can be solid in the run game and also give, the guys on the outside one-on-ones, which is what you want.
Yeah. Eric Kellen brings up a great point too. This rushing offense statistically was the greatest in Bears history, with all of the flaws in this offensive line. What are the pieces that can shoulder up this offensive line and make this not only this running attack more potent, but make this offense overall, more than just the number 30 ranked offense in the league, make it a potent attack week in, week out?
Well, as far as what I've seen, I think they're going to stick with Braxton Jones at left tackle. I think he played well enough to earn that opportunity. He was a rookie, 5th-round pick. Yes, he had his moments of struggle, which you expect from a rookie, but he looked athletic. He looked like he belonged. If he can bulk up and, get stronger, I think he's going to be a really solid player for this team. And Tevin Jenkins, if he can stay healthy, I think he can be a Pro Bowler at right guard personally. He was that dominant when he was healthy. The key areas that they need to figure out are left guard. What are you going to do about Cody Whitehair? Because he struggled in pass protection this year, and he also struggled to stay healthy. Lucas Patrick barely played at center, so you need to get the center position figured out. And I think their biggest problem is at right tackle. Riley Reif isn't the answer, and Larry Borum's not your answer. So they need to get that one figured out. Are you going to do it in free agency, or are you going to do it in the draft? Because there are some really good right tackle options in this draft, but there's also a couple that you could get in free agency and maybe keep yourself flexible going into the draft for other spots. I like Jawan Taylor, the guy from Jacksonville. He did a great job protecting Trevor Lawrence this year. Pass protection is his forte. So if you're looking for somebody to better guard Justin's, right side, I would look at him. In the draft, you got Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, if you see him as a tackle. And also this the other big kid from Ohio State, DeJuan Jones, has been dominating at the Senior Bowl already, so you can look at him as well. There are some really intriguing options at tackle in both free agency at the draft and that I would absolutely look into.
Yeah. One of our great viewers, Erik, asked you, you're Ryan Poles on draft day. With all these different variables, what would you do if you are Ryan Poles with that number 1 pick?
A lot of this depends on what they do in free agency. I'll start there for a second. If I'm going into free agency, there's two guys I'm going after. It's Deron Payne, the defensive tackle from Washington, or Draymond Jones, the defensive tackle from Denver. Those are two legit interior pass rushers who are in their primes. If you can get one of them, you solve an immediate problem, and then you have more flexibility going into the draft. If they have to stay at one and you happen to get one of those guys, I'm taking Will Anderson out of Alabama. I think he can be a franchise changer. People will nitpick certain parts of his game. I don't care. He's a sack artist. He can dominate whenever he wants to dominate, and I think he would be a fantastic pass rusher for them for 10 years. Now, my personal goal would be to move down. I think you can still get a really good player if you move down a certain amount of picks. If you can go to like number 4 with Indianapolis, who's a widely, believed trade partner, I still think you can get either Carter or Anderson at that spot. Or if by some miracle they both go in the top 3 picks, I would still take Tyree Wilson, and I still think you'd end up with a really good pass rusher. So that would be my goal. Look for a trade partner. If you can't get it, I would take Will Anderson.
I got a question for Kellen. Kellen, when they look at a guy like this Will Anderson, they say he's undersized, 6'3", what, 230, Eric, something like that.
I believe he's up to around 250 from what recent reports are.
He's up.
Which is
okay.
Yeah. I believe he's put on weight. They just haven't, listed it on the original websites.
But with that physicality and being a natural world athlete that you were. What's that like to put on that kind of weight, muscle wise? Does it change your speed or anything, or does it change your technique or whatever?
Not really. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that really depends on it's like a per person basis. I've seen guys get slow, and I've seen guys lose some of their first step quickness. But for me, I never really slowed up. Crazy. I was 220 pounds coming out of high school, and then by my sophomore year in college, I was 250. So, packing on weight quick is not a bad thing sometimes, and it depends on where you're putting it too.
Okay.
If you're bulking in your legs, you're going to be a lot better off than if you're just bulking up your upper body, as far as your strength and quickness and all that stuff goes. That's where it all starts.
All right.
Yeah, folks, you are watching Chicago Sports Tracks, Monsters of the Madhouse, brought to you by TC's World of Wonders, Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor, and Budget Cars. We are visiting with Sports Mockery's Erik Lambert, Ace Bears beat man, along with former Chicago Bears great Kellen Davis, and our all-star panel of Mike the Foz Fosno, Brandon Trax Hyatt, Caleb James, and Matt the Coop Man Cooper. Erik, with so many variables in play coming up to April 27th, in how just how NFL run-ups lead with the number 1 overall pick, do you think it's most likely that Ryan Poles won't make a decision on what to do with that pick in terms of trading it or holding on to it till probably draft it?
Not necessarily. I think the most likely window you're going to want to look for is probably after the first week of free agency, which free agency starts on March 15th. And I think after the first week, most of the top veteran quarterbacks will have found new homes. And once you have a better picture of what the quarterback situation is going to be going into the draft, that's when you might start hearing more trade rumors and, buzz starting to really pick up. And the hope that you want, if the Bears are going to trade the pick, is for the teams like Washington, the Jets, the Titans, all these teams that aren't in the top 10 to land these veterans like Brady, Lamar Jackson, if he ends up going somewhere, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr. If those guys land with those teams and teams like Houston, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Carolina still stay without quarterbacks going into the draft, that really helps the Bears because it's going to up the market for teams trying to get the guy that they want. So I would look for, probably around March 20th. That's probably when it'll start, getting interesting in regards of what Ryan Poles starts to hear from other teams as far as draft compensation for possibly coming up for the number 1 pick.
What is the realistic compensation he's going to be asking for if he deals the pick?
I think he'll at least want a future 1 for sure, because it'll keep his options open in regards to the quarterback question. if he wants to move on from Fields next year, if Fields for some reason, doesn't live up to what they hope going into 2023, because then you'll have 2 1s and maybe you can move up for another guy that they are interested in, or you can just continue to stack the roster with first round talent. So it's really a win-win situation. But I absolutely think he'll at least want a future one, depending on how far he drops. If we're talking a swap with Houston at 2, I don't think a future one is feasible. You're probably going to be looking for a couple of 2s in that situation, which is still really good because you can find great players in that regard. But yeah, absolutely. At least a future one, perhaps 2, depending on how far you drop down. If we're talking, 8, 9 with Atlanta or Carolina, they're probably going to want a couple of, future 2s in 2024 and 2025, unless one of those teams throws in a really good player like a Brian Burns from Carolina, as an example, that they might want to pick up for their pass rush. So there's a lot of variables in there, but I do think it starts with a future one, and then you just sort of sprinkle in more picks from there.
Hey, Erik, as we're sitting here talking about the Bears, and I know we got a lot of needs on this team, but I'm very excited about it because I think there's a lot of question marks in the NFC North in general. So how do you landscape the NFC North going into the draft, going into free agency? Because obviously with Green Bay, we have no idea what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of rumors out there. I mean, Twitter's all rumors. I never believe a lot of stuff that I see. But, I mean, you could see the writing on the wall that he could be traded this year. I mean, everything's starting to add up. I have no idea about the Vikings. I have no idea what they are, but they have star players on their team if they get things right. And the Lions look like they're trending in the right direction. So what is your landscape of the North as we go into this?
I personally think 2023 is going to be Detroit's year. I really like their roster. They've done a great job building that roster. I'm still not a big believer in Goff, but he's good enough to get them to the playoffs. And now they've built that confidence, going from a perennial losing team to really finding their rhythm towards the end of the season, beating Green Bay like they did in Green Bay. That provides a ton of momentum going into the offseason. And now they've got the 6th overall pick on top of that from that Matthew Stafford trade, which is huge. So they can continue to build that roster. So I believe they're going to be the team to beat next year if they continue to play like they did. I think Minnesota is going to take a step back. They're going to lose a lot of guys because they have salary cap issues, and Cousins is going to be a year older, so you have to worry about that. And, I don't know what's going to happen with Green Bay, but I think they feel a little more confident in trading Rodgers now because of the optics, because he played poorly towards the end of the season. He's getting older, and you got to dump that contract before that money starts to get way out of control, given the way the contract is structured. So, and they need to find out about Jordan Love. It's do or die at this point in terms of figuring out whether he's going to be your guy of the future or not. So I do believe they're probably going to trade him, but I wouldn't rule out him returning or even retiring. It's really still up in the air, but I would lean towards him being traded. But as far as the division itself, I think the Bears will improve, but not enough to really be a factor in the division race yet. I think they're probably another year away before they get to that point. So this feels like it's going to be Detroit's year.
And you can look at Detroit as how they've drafted the last couple of years too. That's kind of how in our shows that we've talked about here in the last couple of months, I'm like, if you look and see what their draft classes look like the last couple of years, that's what I'm hoping the Bears can get to here as the rebuild starts.
Kellen, we have a question from one of our viewers asking what you think about Georgia's tight end Darnell Washington, and if he might be a good target for the Bears in the draft.
From what I've seen in the playoff games, I think he's very talented, very athletic, a little raw, especially but the other kid they have, I think he was probably learning a lot from him, and I think that'll help him propel him and being in a pro-style offense and all that stuff. I think he's a good prospect, and I think it's kind of not 50-50, but probably 70-30 on whether he's going to pan out. He's a big boy, but, the physicality comes up, several notches when you get into the NFL. You're not playing against other guys, you're playing against men. It's a bit different. And I don't know. I think he's got a shot and could be a good pick if he pans out.
Yeah, definitely a big upside for him. Erik, and also Kellen, if I could get your thoughts. In terms of the biggest need that Justin Fields needs, fellas, a number one go-to Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver. From your sources, Erik, are you hearing that the Bears have a clear priority target for a wide receiver for the free agency season, when it opens up on March 15th?
Not really. I haven't heard much in regards to the wide receivers because from what I've heard, there's not a lot of optimism about the free agent class this year.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a stellar group. Now, that might change if somebody unexpected gets cut, which can always happen. But right now, I don't think wide receiver is going to be their primary focus. They might still dabble in the position, but I think they're going to be more focused on what I mentioned earlier, which is the trenches, because that seems to be where a lot of the strength is for this free agent class. So, unless somebody gets released or an unexpected trade develops, I don't think wide receiver is going to be a priority for them. Not in free agency anyway.
Yeah. Is the draft most likely second, third, or fourth round most likely area where there was a time they were with that?
Yeah, I do believe the draft is probably where they're going to focus. There's a lot of talent, I think, that will be available in the second to fourth round range. There's some really good players. It's a very interesting draft class because there's a lot of guys who are undersized and underweight when you look at them initially, but they pop so much on tape. Like a Zay Flowers out of Boston College, who I'm a big fan of. He looks a lot like Antonio Brown to me. I'm not going to, put him on that perch, but you get the idea that there are some really talented kids in here, but there's also some bigger kids who have a ton of potential, but for one reason or another didn't quite, pop as much as these other guys. So it's a really interesting class in terms of potential. It's just a question of when do you take them where you're willing to take a risk on that potential. And, I don't know if it'll be the second round. I'm leaning more towards third and fourth where they have 3 picks in that range, or they might end up with more if they do end up trading, but I don't know that right now. So as of right now, I would look towards that area for when they start really looking at wide receivers. And I think they can find some good value.
Erik, how do you feel about the running back game right now? Are we going to stick with Montgomery going forward? Are we going to invest in Saquon Barkley? I know he said he doesn't want to set the new record for contract, but he wants that Christian McCaffrey money, as he calls it. So think the Bears are going to spend that extra $4 or $5 million a year, or are you going to pay David Montgomery and stick with what we got?
I personally think Barkley's probably going to get tagged. It's only $10 million, so it probably, serves the Giants pretty well to tag him. So I don't think he's probably going to be on the market. Josh Jacobs is a guy I really like. I'd really love to see him in a Bears uniform, but I also think the Raiders are going to be really keen on keeping him as well. So that puts me on Tony Pollard, who I think would be a fantastic addition to this offense. He's an electric runner, great in the passing game. Now, the thing with Montgomery is I do feel that Poles is telling the truth and they'd like to keep him, but it really comes down to what he's asking in terms of price. We don't know what that is right now. There are some rumors that it's $12 million. I don't know if it's actually that high or not. He denied it himself, so I would take that to the bank because he's not the type of guy who would be a liar. So if you can get him in like the 7 million range, somewhere around there, I think he'd be worth keeping because he's a good player. He's a good all-around player. He's solid in pass protection. He can receive. He can do all the things he need to do. And him and Khalil Herbert were a key part of this great rushing offense you just had. So why change it? You just might need to sprinkle a little more pass catching prowess into the mix, and you still got a great backfield. So I do believe they want to keep him, but if his price goes too high, I do think they'd be willing to look elsewhere, probably in the draft rather than free agency.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are visiting with Erik Lambert, the award-winning ace beat writer for the Chicago Bears at Sports Mockery. Erik, the long-suffering Bears fan, which is all of us, let's face it, we're not looking at our 4th rebuild since we let Lovie Smith go. And having this number 1 overall pick, we've been talking, on the show for weeks about it. I'm sure the Bears fans you talk to, the excitement about it. Is it hyperbole, Erik, to call this the Bears' most important draft since 1965 when they were able to land a couple of future Hall of Famers in the first round, named Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers?
I think they've had some extremely important drafts since 65, but I would call this probably the most important in a decade that they've had in terms of having all the cap space that they have, having the number 1 overall pick, and having a young quarterback that might actually be showing something of franchise material. It's all sort of right there for them if they can get enough of these picks correct and sign the right guys in order to, build a roster that can help Fields excel. We don't know if they're going to do that. I think following what Howie Roseman did around Jalen Hurts is a great way to, go about it if you can. Build up that offensive line, get him some good protection, and then see if you can get him a couple of really nice targets. I think if Fields is better protected, Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool can actually be a solid wide receiver tandem, and then throw a third guy in there who can be a playmaker, and you've got something to work with. So I do believe they have some good enough building blocks to work with. And I believe that, yes, this is absolutely an important offseason, very important, especially with the number 1 overall pick, depending on what you do with it, because you should either get a superstar player with the pick itself, or a huge haul of picks that you continue to build out the roster with if you sell it off to another team. So either way, you should be golden unless Poles finds a way to completely blow it, which we won't know probably for another 3 years anyway.
So Erik, with the Bears having so much cap space, they got the most out of any team. But what other teams behind them do you think could give them competition? Some of the other teams, I saw the list a little bit earlier today. Is there any other teams out there that you think is also going to be as aggressive as the Bears are going into free agency, or might be in a better position to grab some of these players compared to the Bears?
I think the Atlanta Falcons are probably a team you want to watch. They're second in cap space. They're reaching that point where they can start to be a little more aggressive. They have the 8th pick. They still have quarterback question marks, so they might throw a lot of that money at one of the veteran guys that they want. Maybe Brady. Maybe they make a run at Lamar Jackson, because I think he'd really look really good in that Arthur Smith offense. But they're absolutely a team I would watch. And it's weird. There's really not a lot of teams this year that have a ton of cap space if you really think about it. I mean, the Bears and the Falcons are kind of out there on their own in that regard. I'm more blown away by how many teams are actually going to be over the salary cap this year. You got the Saints, you've got the Packers, you've got the Buccaneers, who are going to lose Tom Brady and still be over the cap, so you have to keep that in mind. The Vikings, who I mentioned, there's a ton of teams, which is why I think there might be some unexpected cuts that sort of fuel this free agent class that we end up seeing. So, which is why I'm a little bit excited about it. So it's going to be really interesting. I don't know if the Bears are going to be the most aggressive team, but I do think they're going to take probably 2 or 3 aggressive swings, depending on who ends up becoming available after the franchise tags.
Yeah.
So right before this podcast, Sean Payton kind of announced his head coach with the Denver Broncos. I know there were so many rumors happening earlier in the year. They was going to be coming back. He's putting together this all-star coaching team and Tom Brady in free agency. What do you think Denver is going to do next year now that Sean Payton's going to be there? Are they going to stick with Russell Wilson and try to rebuild around him, or you think they're going to go into the free agency class and try to pick up one of these veteran QBs?
Denver has no choice in that regard. They are locked into Russell Wilson because of his contract. They can't trade it. They can't cut him. They can't do anything with it. This move to get Sean Payton is basically save Russell Wilson at all costs, because that's pretty much their only avenue forward. They have no first-round picks. They don't have a lot of money to spend. They need Payton to get Russell Wilson at least back close to where he was playing in Seattle. And I think he can. I'm a big believer in Sean Payton. He's an excellent offensive mind. I think Wilson will play a lot better next year. I don't know if it'll matter, because I think Kansas City's still the team to beat, and they're going to be the team to beat for years to come. So, but I do think Denver will be more competitive, but they really need to make a run at it now, because Russell's getting older and that contract's going to be a problem probably for the next two or 3 years. So this move was made to get the most out of him as much as possible.
Yeah. Erik, this is a question from one of our great viewers. And folks, thank you so much for sending us your questions for Erik and Kellen. You're going to hear this question, I'm sure, from 1,000 people between now and the start of the 2023 season. Realistically, how many more seasons do you think, if everything goes to blueprint, will it take for the Bears to be able to seriously compete for an NFL championship?
If things go well, both this offseason and next offseason, I think they'll be in the Super Bowl conversation by 2025. That's what they're probably shooting. That's not the optimistic view. That's the realistic view. That's usually how long rebuilds take to sort of come to fruition. Now, if Fields starts to take off, like really legitimately take off as a possible top 10 guy, and you can sort of retool the defense, they can compete a lot sooner, maybe even, next season, because the team played hard. They played well. They played smart most of the time. I think Eberflus is the type of guy who has the right idea on how to get a team to play their best. It's just he needs talent. He needs more talent. They need more bodies in the worst possible way, and that's what this offseason is going to be about, getting more talent. And I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team this year, but I do think they're going to be a playoff team next year unless they completely botch this offseason. And you can start to see them take those steps towards being a contender, which is what Ryan Poles is shooting for. So I think 2025 is what you want to circle in terms of them starting to really think about a Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Erik Lambert. the award-winning reporter for Sports Mockery, Bears Beat Man. You can check him out every day. He posts 6 to 8 breaking stories on the Bears. Erik, it's been our honor and privilege. Thank you for the wonderful information and your insight on the Bears. Appreciate your time, and we can't wait to look forward to your stories tomorrow and down the road as you cover this very exciting Chicago Bears draft, free agency, and draft season.
It was my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for answering the call, Erik.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Erik.
Our pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Erik Lambert of Sports Mockery. We are back with our award-winning panel, including Chicago Bears great Kellen Davis. KD, so great to have you back. KD, if we could kind of flip back to Championship Sunday, can we get your thoughts, Kellen, on the NFC and AFC Championship games? I guess starting first with the Chiefs, the legend of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you've played hurt so many times during your career. Patrick Mahomes playing on basically one ankle. Was that as impressive as any big-time performance in a championship game as you've seen, Kellen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with it being his right ankle and him being a right-handed quarterback, because he's planting off that ankle every time he throws the ball. And I don't know if you've ever had a high ankle sprain, but when your foot starts to rotate, when you put pressure on it, it hurts. It hurts a lot. So, I mean, I thought he played a terrific game. And, his throws, you wouldn't even know he was hurt other than, knowing he was hurt. So, I mean, I thought it was really impressive. And, they finished in typical fashion. It was a tight game, and Mahomes gave him a shot at the end. That's pretty much how it goes for them. I thought he did just an amazing job.
Then you look at the flip side of it, Kellen, the 49ers, they lose Brock Purdy to a torn UCLL. And that's just, man, it just seems like that's the epitome of how tough a game football can be, when you can have the perfect game plan, everybody's executing, but when the injury gods are not smiling on you, it's not going to be your day. You've been there before. How tough was that for you just to watch, as a former player, watch the Niners go through so many injuries?
Well, I mean, I tore my elbow up really good. So, yeah, I blew everything out, including the UCL. It was not fun. It hurts, and it takes a long time to come back from. So, I feel for him for sure. And I was as a fan, just a fan of the game, I was looking forward to seeing what he was going to do, because he was playing really well up to that point. And I thought it was going to be a very interesting game. But, when you get down to your fourth-string quarterback, the guy's probably had like 15 reps all season. It's not real fair.
Not at all yet. Josh Johnson playing on his NFL record 14th team. It's just the luck of the draw sometimes. Absolutely. Hey, fellas, let's bring everybody, our entire panel, in on this. Super Bowl 57 looks like the definition of a pick'em, a championship games, guys. The Eagles right now are a slight 1.5 point favorite. If we could go around the horn, how do you guys see this showdown between the Chiefs and Eagles playing out? Let's start with you, if we could, Kellen.
I mean, for me, it comes down to Patrick Mahomes versus the Eagles pass rush. If they can get pressure on him and get to him, they're going to win the game. If they can't, it's going to be very difficult for them to win the game. And I think, everybody's talking about Patrick's ankle. It's like 2 weeks, he's going to be better. And no, that's not going to be the case. He won't be 100% for the Super Bowl. If it really is a high ankle sprain, he's not going to be better for, a good month where he's going to be 100% healthy. So, I think that's really the game within the game is, can that offensive line hold up against the Eagles pass rush? And then can their guys cover? And, can Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes if he's getting pressured?
Yeah.
Kellen, is that a month off of your ankle, or can you walk on it and stuff like that? Or
no, I mean, you're like, so it's a case by case thing, but like when you sprain an ankle, like right away, you want to keep moving as much as you can. It hurts like hell, but if you don't, it gets stiff. So you want to have mobility in that ankle throughout the process of healing. Otherwise, it'll get stiff, and then it becomes more prone to get it hurt again, and it also becomes more painful over time. So it's kind of like you got to kind of push a little bit, but you can't do too much, or you could re-injure it or make it worse and aggravate it. So you got to kind of find that fine line where you're getting mobile and you're also healing at the same time. That's just them's the facts.
Okay.
Kellen, how do you see this injury to Patrick adjusting the Chiefs' game plan for Super Bowl Sunday? Like you talked about, this is an aggressive Eagles pass rush. Just from a casual perspective, it didn't look like they had to water it down a little bit against the Bengals. But how would they have to adjust it in a situation like this where he's going to get heavy pressure regularly against the most elite pass rush unit in the league?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're going to be asking a whole lot of the O-line if he has to sit in the pocket. If he doesn't make enough progress here over these next couple of weeks and he has to sit in the pocket, that's going to be a real problem for them. And the Kansas City O-line is good, but that pass rush is serious from Philly. It is. And if you are going to keep him inside that pocket and only give him a couple of lanes to move up or move back or move sideways and not get out of the pocket, then that changes the entire game. He's going to have to get the ball out quick, and that's going to change their offensive game plan. Like that old I think I was watching the game and one of the commentators said it, I think really well, is like, those off-schedule plays when he gets outside the pocket, that's when they get their big explosive plays with him. Like he can throw, obviously he can throw a deep ball from inside the pocket, but that's going to happen a lot faster when he gets off schedule and they get outside, and him and Kelsey and the receivers, they seem to really be on the same page when it comes to, pushing the ball downfield like that. And missing the big playability in an offense is going to be, it's going to be tough for them if you're just dunking and dinking the ball down, even though you have a great quarterback.
Yeah, great point, Kellen. Kellen, Bears fans, we love to play what if. Patrick's dad, the former great Major League Baseball pitcher, came out today and said, the Patrick way back in 2017 was hoping the Bears would draft him. Obviously, we know fate didn't play out that way. The Bears went with Mitch Trubisky. But if you could go back in time, let's just say the Bears pick Patrick Mahomes instead of Mitch, leave him there for the Chiefs at 10. What kind of story are we talking about, in hindsight over the last 5 years? If Patrick Mahomes is quarterback of the Bears in the last 5 years, does this team have at least one Super Bowl at Hallis Hall or one Super Bowl trophy?
I would think that they would have at least gone. Won one, I'm not sure, but I would like to think they would have at least gone. I don't think Nagy would have ever gotten them there, no matter who was playing quarterback. But Fox maybe. I think in that era, he probably would have got them at least to one, and maybe a shot at winning one. Because Mahomes is a much better quarterback than most of the quarterbacks we've had at the Bears for the last couple decades, and he's in my mind, the way he plays the game, he's a generational talent, and he's going to be one of the best to ever do it. But yeah, a coach can still screw that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start running some stuff that has nothing to do with him. Yeah, you can make a really good player look bad.
Absolutely.
Kellen, I asked you a question beginning of the season about the tight end position and how many times you had to block versus, I think you said Cole Kmet blocks at like 60-something% or whatever on the inside. And then you were like 11% or something like that. How do you think Cole Kmet finished the season? And did he earn your respect this year? And were you able to see him go out and perform more as well as blocking too? Or what's your take on him altogether? Do you think
I liked what I saw out of him down the stretch of the year. I think, they finally gave him some opportunities, and I think he was capitalizing. And I think just watching Fields and him kind of together, and Fields kind of trying to grasp the offense and getting better as a passer, even a little bit towards the end of the season, I think that he's, a talented enough guy where, they should put some give him more opportunities. And I think that that'll be a really good security blanket / potential for big plays down the seams and inside for Fields. And I think that as Fields gets better, he'll also get better.
Do you think we'll go for another tight end in the draft or pick one up in the free agency when kind of run a double tight ends at sometimes, or
I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up a veteran in free agency. It depends on if some of those really athletically talented tight ends, are still available in the, second to fourth, somewhere in there, that they don't take one. But I would think that they would bring in, somebody older with some more experience to come in and either challenge for the starting spot or be a very solid number 2.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, lots of exciting things coming up between here and the draft for sure, guys. All right, Kellen, you were talking about the magic of Patrick Mahomes. Going to put you on the spot, my friend. If you could, give us your prediction for Super Bowl 7.
Ooh, it's a tough one. I love Patrick Mahomes. I really like Jalen Hurts, but I think it's going to be Philly's defense that wins the game.
Kind of a smash mouth 2016 type game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they haven't seen anything like Patrick Mahomes all year, but that doesn't really matter to the guys that with their hands in the ground.
Yeah.
So those, if I was the Eagles fans, I would be counting on those guys to do their job better than the Chiefs offensive linemen. I think that's going to win the game for them.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. If we could go around the horn, Coop, Caleb, Foz, and Trax, let's get your Super Bowl 57 predictions, fellas.
I am going to go the opposite. I think Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, is an excellent coach. Watching the Chiefs play the Bengals over the weekend, Joe Burrow, who I think is a great player. I think they had a great game plan for him, and they held them down. And I just always think of these big moments that he's done with the Giants, and now he always comes up with some great game plans. And I think they're going to find a way. The Chiefs, even with Patrick Mahomes, I think he'll be a little bit more healthy, and I'm going to go with them. I feel like they're going to pull this one off, and Andy Reid's going to get that win over his old team.
Yeah, I like it. I like the thinking there, Coop. Caleb, my friend, you've been following the NFL closely week in and week out. How do you see Super Bowl 57 played out?
I got the Eagles in this one as well. And I think the Chiefs, they have the best defensive player and Chris, Chris Jones, and if he doesn't have massive impactful plays, I expect the running game of the Eagles, to break out, including Jalen Hurts, but then also the receivers and Brown and Smith, and so I expect them to do big things. So I'm excited for it. I mean, obviously, it could go either way, but I'm going with the Eagles.
Mike Fosnow, you saw the magic of the Eagles firsthand in person this year. How do you think they have enough to overcome Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs?
I think it's really going to come down to Andy Reid's coaching for the game. Matt had touched on, and Kellen had touched on a little bit. I mean, coaching could definitely ruin a great quarterback or make a great quarterback and a great offense. And I think Andy Reid going against the team he was with for 13 years, and they know his style. They know what to expect from him and his little tricks and play calling. I think it's going to be a really good game. If Patrick Mahomes was 100% healthy, I would probably go the Chiefs winning this game. But I'm probably going to go Philadelphia. It's going to be a close game by 3 points. That's my prediction.
Right. All right, Foz, I tell you what, you're usually on the money. Let's go to our Oracle, Trax Strodamus. How does Super Bowl 57 play out, Trax?
Mine kind of dovetails with Kellen Davis and also Foz. I'm going to have to go 34-31, and that's going to be Philly, and you're going to get that field goal in at the end. I think that Patrick Mahomes is going to have just enough juice left to keep that ankle going and still be mobile enough to get those points up there. But I really think it's going to be like he was saying, that defense that pushes it through, and Pat's not going to be able to answer the bell at the very end like he did this time.
Yeah, I tell you what, it'll be exciting. I see everyone's points. I'm thinking the same. I'm kind of thinking along Trax's line. I'm thinking a shootout. I'm thinking the defenses will own this game early, but then the playmakers, the Travis Kelce's, the Patrick Mahomes, and obviously the Jalen Hurts will take over in the second half. I'm calling a 35-31 Philly victory as they bring it back home. And for the second time in 5 years, the Eagles win the Super Bowl with a former backup quarterback. So it should be a lot of fun. Guys, before we part, anybody have any final words, anything that anybody want to add before we call the show?
I do want to ask one question to Kellen. Kellen, did you ever give up on Jalen before he got to where he's at now? And do you see some similarities between the quarterback that we got along, Fields with what Jalen's got? And do you think that he could actually be better than Jalen?
Yeah, I mean, I think their track and development looks very similar up to this point. With the adage that, Fields is a better runner, not by a whole lot, but he's a better runner than Hurts is. He's got the arm strength and talent. It's just he's got to work on where he's putting the ball. But, we weren't talking about Jalen Hurts like we are now at the beginning of the season. So you got to remember that. It's like very, like this season is his season. He came in and balled out, did his thing. But up until then, everybody, he was a question mark last year. They were talking about whether they're going to bring him back or draft a quarterback this year, so things can change very fast depending on the development of the player and, the relationship with the coach. So I think that's a very good, comparison between those two. I think they're very similar.
Okay.
Yeah, great point by Kellen. Yeah, 8 months ago we were talking about, did Jalen Hurts have the accuracy to be a franchise quarterback for the Eagles? He has definitely answered that question in spades this year. Folks, we hope we've answered some of your Bears free agency and draft questions with this very special edition of Monsters of the Madhouse, brought to you by Chicago Sports Podcast. Don't forget to join us next week when Chicago's 5-star sports culinary chef Fitzmagic joins us to share his surefire Super Bowl party menu winners. Fellas, guys, thanks everyone for being part of the show this week. It's an honor and privilege talking sports with you. Kellen, Matt the Kool-Man Cooper, Mike the Foz Fosno, Captain Caleb James, our executive producer, the creator of Chicago Sports Podcast, Brandon Trax Heights. We appreciate everything, fellas. Thanks, guys. You have a great week, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
You bet, guys. And